My name is Chege Ngugi. I am the Africa Region Director for ChildFund International. I support 9 countries in Africa. I've worked for ChildFund for the last 12 years, and I can say I've had the privilege of serving in different countries. Served in Mozambique as a country director, Ethiopia as a country director for 4 years, Kenya as a country director for 3 years, and now as a region director for the last 2 years. I think Africa has a number of advantages and disadvantages. I think for now, we have the youngest population. I think 60% of our population is below 15%, after 15 years, which gives us an advantage of having a strong, youthful population that can work. Of course, a number of countries have discovered minerals, natural resources, they're being exploited. But on the other side, there's climate change. So that has a conflict because some of those are fossil fuels, which has dangerous greenhouse gas emissions. So that's a challenge we find ourselves in, positive and negative. In terms of Horn of Africa, I think one to start with, Horn of Africa is the most food insecure part of the Africa continent. And here I refer to Ethiopia, Kenya, Somalia, and some part of southern Sudan. Those are the countries that are affected. Currently, I think for the last 3 years, the Horn of Africa has undergone the worst emergencies in its history, over 40 years. Started with the desert locust infestation that ate everything, anything green that came across was swept. Immediately after that was flooding that hit a number of countries, especially all of them, the 3 countries, Ethiopia, Kenya, and Somalia. But the most affected was Somalia and Ethiopia. Immediately after that, we had the drought that has affected over, I think, 6 million people in those 3 countries. And remember, we're talking of just after COVID, when just people are thinking they're recovering. So at one time, the region had all the 3, COVID, flooding, and drought at the same time. And you can imagine the magnitude of impact on especially on the most vulnerable households, women and children. They felt the brunt of all those emergencies. So it's an area that's an issue that is Africa, Horn of Africa is confronting with. We can say the big ones, you're talking of drought, where there's no rain. And because of that, it has different implications. We have a number of, and especially in the region where it hit, we have a number of people who depend on animals or livestock. They are pastoralists. And with the drought, most of the water dried up, and even grazing areas dried up. So most people lost their animals, and that's their main lifeline. In addition to that, it's what children depend on for nutrition and food, milk and all that. And again, because of that, people had to move around. So we can say they were internally displaced because of drought, affected a number of things, education, child abuse, gender-based violence, all those ills. The same with the drought. With flooding, like we have seen in a number of countries, like recently in Mozambique. Swept all the infrastructure, houses, health infrastructure, education infrastructure, and all that. So again, displacement in a different way, which now calls for investment to support people, especially basic, food, life-saving, housing and food. Yeah. Good. For example, when you look at COVID, most people are kept in school. Most kids were kept in school. And especially the biggest impact on children from the vulnerable households and also in the informal settlements, because most schools moved to online platforms. But for you to get online platform, you have to have internet. You have to have electricity if you don't have internet. And most of those people don't have that. Well, with others, you have to have a certain radio for you to listen into, but maybe you don't have money to buy the batteries, or there's no electricity to charge that. So that's where the other aspects of education and livelihoods, of the children. The other thing is the diseases. They get all of diseases, that waterborne diseases, climate-induced diseases, and all that. Again, children are affected by that. Then when you look at even drought, when there is no food at home, children either have to go out and look for food or walk long distances to look for water and firewood. Girls most likely are violated, abused by opportunists. That's that. Then you look at even women, because sometimes parents leave them children at home and go look for fodder, for food, and for water. Again, women are exploited with that. There's a lot of increased protection issues, abuse issues, and gender-based violence because of that. So the impact is felt on the children is too much. It takes time. That's what I'm saying. It's a drawback. It takes too much time for them to recover, and some of them may not be recover. Others, when they drop out, like girls, they don't go back to school. They get married off, or just say they've had enough, or there's too much problem at home that they stay home to help their siblings and their parents. Boys drop out and get some manual jobs, income-generating activities to support themselves and their families. It's a nightmare how you help children to have that bright future you have always helped them to do. Think of a future that they will be, self-sustaining, self-providing. It doesn't come. Yeah. So and then with climate change, it's a long-term effect. Like what we are seeing, this cyclic drought or cyclic flooding, it's not something that you can say it will end tomorrow, that there is hope. So that's where the issue is coming. And again, we have very big levels of unemployment, especially for youth, which is a big challenge for Africa, especially Africa. Yeah. I think there are a number of interventions we're looking at long term. I think we look and classify them three classifications: life-saving, because you have to save life; short-term interventions; and long-term interventions. Life savings is where you move in and give them food aid, or medical aid, or shelter, non-food items, just to hold them wherever they are. The short-term is now you help them to transition from an emergency setup to a place where they are settling down. Not yet, but they are settling down. If they were displaced, they're able to move back to their homes, and you help them to construct their home or equip their homes. And then if schools were destroyed by flooding or cyclones, then you're working with the government and the community to rebuild the school, at least the space. That's and including even the health facilities and all that. Then in the long run, where now you help them to move into development, where they are able to undertake maybe farming, they are able to undertake maybe income-generating activities that they can provide for themselves, instead of waiting for organizations or government to feed them or to provide for them. Now they're able to produce for themselves. Even if it's going to school, they're able to pay for school fees or buy uniform at least. If they're able to go to the hospital, they can pay for token amount for medical services and all that. So where now you can see there's hope. They're building their livelihoods, their future and all that. That's a kind of trajectory that you look at. As we look at now, this doesn't look like there's hope. Just because you look at how it has come. Desert locust infestation, COVID, drought, flooding, and then there's conflict. Look at Ethiopia and Somalia, just for example, Horn of Africa. Conflict that have displacing many people are losing their lives, children are losing their parents and all that. It doesn't look like there's hope, but I think the humanitarian community, donors and government have that commitment, a resolve to help the communities address the issues and move forward. So there's some level of hope, but I think the critical thing is how we turn around, like communities, how do they appreciate each other instead of fighting each other? How can they resolve their conflict without getting into war? Even governments, how can they sit down and resolve that? Even if it's government and the community, how do they sit down and resolve that without resorting to war and all that? And then how do we build partnerships with different organizations, governments, to address some of the things that cause conflict? And again, coming up with long-term policies that address conflict, address climate change, and getting into mitigation and adaptation measures that address some of these things. Because some of the conflict is simple, but it builds up to big conflict. Like we're talking of livestock farmers. They need grass to graze the animal. They need water. The other community also needs water, and they meet there. That's a resource-based conflict. I think the other issue is investing in youth. I think we need to see how do we address the issue of youth in Africa, giving them technology, giving them opportunities for them to create, to self-employ, assist them to undertake like climate-related interventions, green jobs, and all that. I think if we're able to address that, we'll create a generation that knows how to care for themselves and also to avoid conflict and to coexist with each other.